might have a little bit of issue with the time thing because this is a 3-hour program, so.
Go for it.
I only put this thing up here so that I have some things in here. If I was down there, it might be a little harder for you to see, so I'm going to stand up here if that's all right. Well, first things first, let me just introduce my wife, Carrie. She is sitting at the back. You have to stand so they can see you. So, all right, there you go. Okay. I'm usually the person that people see, but she's an absolutely crucial part of our ministry, so I just wanted to have you the opportunity to meet her. Just as another quick introduction, when we go around to speak in churches and conventions and so forth, I do what we call our seminar safari. When you go on a safari, and we do take a real one to South Africa each year, if you're interested in a real genuine wildlife safari, we do take one each year. But when you go on a safari, you're there to see the big game. You're there to see lions and leopards and elephants and so forth. Well, I call our series a seminar safari because when people are interested in this topic, or hopefully there's interest in the topic, but people like to know the answers to the big questions. A lot of people will tell me, well, I don't believe in evolution, but I don't know how to intelligently argue, against it and so forth. Or people ask us questions about the dinosaurs all the time. The flood is another huge topic. That people are so confused about. Christians today, if asked where the water would have come from for a global flood, most people don't have an answer for that, or don't have a realistic answer. Or even where did the water go afterwards? A lot of people have no idea about that either. So there's a lot of amazing issues that literally support the biblical version of origins. So when we talk about the creation model, that encompasses Genesis 1 through 12, because in Genesis 1 through 12 you will find the origins of all of the essential aspects of what's called the creation model. In other words, when somebody says, well, where did giraffes come from? Well, that was Genesis chapter 1. That's the creation. Why do people do bad things? Well, that's not part of creation. That's part of Genesis chapter 3. Sin entering the world and the curse and so forth. Why are there weather patterns? Why are there mountain ranges, just to our west here? That's all related to the global flood. That wasn't part of the creation week. So it goes on the whole way through. Why do people speak different languages? That's all part of Genesis 11. Why is the whole world focused on little Israel? That's all part of Genesis 12. So the creation model, which gives us our current earth, many things physical about the earth, is found in Genesis 1 through 12. What we're going to be looking at tonight is one of those aspects, and that's the creation. And this is based on Romans 1, verse 20. So when I do our seminar safaris, I dress up in my khakis because we're going to go on a safari, all right? So this is one of our wildlife series. We have a number of them that we do. This is kind of the first one. In fact, if you look at the screen here, this is our core series. When we go into a church, typically these will be the ones that we will present at a church. And not necessarily in the order that you see them, but usually over a weekend, usually Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, or however they're configured. The one that we're doing tonight is this one, the Hunters and Hunted. And then there are others. There are others in the wildlife series. There's others in the flood series. Some of you have told me already that you have our Grand Canyon DVD. We're hopefully coming out with another one, Lord willing, called The Stricken Earth. And that takes it from the flood up to now. Why do we have earthquakes and volcanic activity? Why is there such a thing as climate change? Why are there ocean trenches in the Pacific? Why are they all shaped like an arc? Why are all continents shifting toward the West Pacific and so forth? All these things are answered but by understanding the global flood, especially from the flood to now. So that's called The Stricken Earth. So these are our core series, though. So we want to get started with this particular one tonight, and but what I wanted to show you too is I don't know what Carrie has down on the table. She's the one who packed the box, so I think we probably have all of these as DVDs down there, and we do sell them as sets too. You get a 33% discount. Then there's also some of the sets include this little thing. It's kind of a fun activity. It's a quiz, 30-question pop quiz. We also have a curriculum. if somebody wants to do a home study or even a Sunday school study or whatever. One of the newest things we've started, and we're up to 6 now, is the Adventures of Ranger Mike. People have come to us for years now saying, where are the video adventures for kids that we don't have to filter all the evolution out of and so forth. So these are all wildlife oriented, but each one of them it features something to do with Genesis 1 through 12. So we started a whole set, and we're up to number 6 to be released very shortly. So without any further ado about that, I'm going to put this thing down now, and we're going to start by looking at Romans 1:20. Romans 1:20 says basically this: since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, which are his eternal power and his divine nature, have been clearly seen. Actually, we don't need the lights dimmed yet. It'll be halfway through the program, and then we'll dim it. Then we'll need the lights dim for that. Actually, that's a nice. That will be really good. But for the next 30 minutes or so, you can keep them up. That would be good. Thank you. Romans 1:20, since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood by that which has been made, so that mankind is without excuse. Now that's amazing. What is that verse actually saying? Well, look around you. The evidence for design is everywhere. Now it's not like the evolutionists can't see it. I mean, everyone can see the evidence for design. It's what you do with that evidence. What do you take out of that? But God is basically saying here, if you can't see the evidence for creation design, there is no excuse. We will all die one day, and we will not be able to stand before our Creator and go, oh, I didn't know there was a God. He'll say, I made it plain to you, but you chose to believe something else. So with that in mind, we want to have a look at 3 very simple lessons tonight that you can take to the nth degree after this session if you want to. But we want to look at 3 very simple ideas tonight. First of all, the first simple lesson is this: every creature has its own amazing story that it can tell. I don't care what kind of a creature it is, from a grand creature down to a little gnat, mosquito that you swat. Every creature has astounding things that will amaze you if you actually study that creature. So let's have a look at some amazing things. Now, some of the things I'm going to show you are going to be a little bit more obvious, and you'll have to forgive my South African bias. But anyway, let me just show you some of the creatures that I had, and some things that are amazing. One of my favorite creatures in South Africa was a chameleon. Now, you all know about a chameleon. You all know how amazing it is that they change color. But did you know that you can trick a chameleon into changing color? They communicate by changing color as well. A male can communicate with a female, and she can communicate back her interest and so forth just by changing their color. But a chameleon, when it's in its natural environment, it will change color all on its own. You can trick a chameleon into changing its color by taking a recognizable object like a fork, holding it near the chameleon, take a flashlight, shine it on the fork, and what does that do to the chameleon? It makes a shadow there. After a while, turn off the light, take away the fork, and the shadow stays. But it's not the shadow that stays, it's where the skin color changed to match the shadow. And the thinking end of the chameleon had no idea that there was even a shadow there. You can take a chameleon and put him into a dry, dead tree, and right in front of your eyes, he'll turn brown to match all the leaves. Take him out of that and put him into a beautiful green tree with yellow flowers right in front of your eyes. He'll turn exactly the color green that he needs to be blended in, and he'll even get little yellow spots on him to match the flowers. It's amazing to watch them work. And the Zulu people that I grew up with, every time they would see a chameleon, they would panic and try to kill it. And I'd say, why are you killing the chameleon? They said, because we're really afraid of it. I said, well, I can see that, but why are you so afraid of it? Their answer to me was, there's an evil spirit living inside it. I said, an evil spirit? Where do you get that idea? Why is there an evil spirit living inside? They said, how else can you explain? It's changing color by magic. I said, it's not magic, and I explained to them, how the chameleon designed, for example, all the other lizards we had in Zululand. They can either climb up a tree when danger approaches, or run under a rock, or jump into the water and swim. Look at the chameleon. He can do none of those. He is like the sloth of the reptile world. They're very, very, very slow. So the only defense they have is just sitting quietly and blending in. If you're lucky enough to see a chameleon and catch it, you will have no trouble catching it, and you can just put your hand down and it'll just walk right up onto you. Because it doesn't know to be afraid. It can't do anything about it anyway. So chameleon sits real quietly, and as you know, one eye can look up, another eye can look down, they're all Google-eyed. So you can, if the chameleon sees a fly landing here, he'll turn his head and make both eyes look, and that way he gets that 3D look, and he can tell if his tongue is long enough, to scoot out and zap the thing. And if this chameleon was actually a life-size one, his tongue would be way out to here. I never had one this big. But anyway, that's one creature. Let me show you another one. This is one that we never did have in South Africa, but this kind of creature can be found in a lot of different places. You can even have have these right here in the States. There are all kinds of carnivorous plants, and you know how they work. They all have some type of a lure. Either it's a smell or a color or something that pulls the insect, or whatever it is, it pulls it toward it. But they all have a trap, so that when the creature is in the trap, there's no escape. Now this particular one has a certain smell that comes out. A Venus flytrap is not something you normally plant around your house. For one thing, they're not very pretty, and for another thing, they kind of stink. But that's okay, because what are they after? They've got no brains, no muscles, and no nerves. They can't think, I think I'd like a blue bottle fly today. You know, that's not what they think of. They can't think. They have no brain. But they open up and put out a smell like this, and along comes a fly. The fly is looking for places to lay her eggs, or maybe to get food, and she goes into that smell and thinks there's food. And you know how it works. She goes down and she lands in there trying to see where the food is. Next thing you know, zap, and the thing closes on top of her. The weird thing is, you watch that happen. You can watch YouTube videos, you can watch all kinds of these things happening. As soon as the trap closes, the creature can't get out. All these nice little jail bars are all right there. There's no way for that creature to escape. The only way for that creature to escape is if I were to come and open him up and let the fly out. Well, I'm not going to do that anyway, but the whole point is, this creature cannot escape. And the lure and trap system of this is absolutely amazing. But there's sundews, there's bladderworts, there's all kinds of carnivorous plants. Well, I don't always like to spiritualize everything, but this kind of reminded me of my condition as a sinner. The Bible says that I'm a sinner, trapped in my sin, and there is no escape from the penalty. That fly, there's no escape. The only way he's going to get out is if I go let him out. The only way I can escape my own sin, the penalty of my sin, I can't do anything about it, is to trust in Jesus Christ, who came and freed me by dying on the cross and by being buried and rising again from the dead. My faith in Jesus Christ sets me free from the penalty. Well, that's just another little interesting creature. How about this guy from Australia? This is a particular type of frog. The mother, when she has her babies, she opens her mouth and eats her babies. Now, you would say, okay, now that is one weird way to try to keep your kind alive on the planet, right? You eat your babies. But what is she really doing? Anything that she would put in her mouth and goes out in her stomach, she has such powerful stomach acids that anything that goes in there is going to get immediately destroyed. But when she swallows her babies, there's a chemical in the skin of the babies that as the baby goes into the mother's stomach, this chemical in the skin communicates with the walls of the mother's stomach, and it stops the production of that acid. So the babies can slide right into the stomach, mature in there. While they're in there, of course, the mother can't eat. When they're mature enough to live on their own, she opens up her mouth, and out come all the babies. The moment the babies are out, then her stomach begins to produce acid again. Now, what can you possibly say to make it clear that anyone on the planet should be able to look at that and say, How could that have developed by just random chance? How in the world could the skin of the baby frog have the exact chemical in it to stop the production of acid in the mother's stomach? I mean, this is design if ever there's design. Every one of these creatures. Well, those are just 3 things. What I want to do is talk about a giraffe now. We've looked at one reptile, one amphibian, one plant. Let's talk about a mammal. Let's talk about giraffes. When we go on our wildlife safari, everybody loves the giraffes because they're so tall, 16 to 18 feet, and when they run, they're so graceful, and they're just beautiful animals. But the cool thing about a giraffe is, because its neck is so high, how in the world does it get water? Now, all the other creatures, I mean, the elephant goes around with an automatic straw built into his system, so he's got no problem getting water. But think about all the other animals. Their heads are already near the water. The lions, you know, the wild dogs, the zebras, whatever, their heads are already down there. So when they walk up to the water hole, it's no problem. They just walk up and drink. What does a giraffe do? Now, it gets frustrating if you've got a camera trying to film it, because it takes a while for a giraffe to do this, because they have to make sure there's no predators. After they're positive there's no predators, a giraffe walks up to the water and then puts its legs out like this, spreads its front legs. That lowers his body, but it's not low enough. Then he bends his legs. Now he's in this real vulnerable position. Bends his legs. That lowers the front of his body low enough that he can bring that long neck down to the water to drink. But then a sad thing happens to the giraffe, because his neck is long and thick and full of blood. So when the neck goes down like this, gravity pulls all that blood down to his head. And as the blood goes down more and more and more, the pressure in the head gets greater and greater and greater, and finally, the head just pops. Design flaw. No. That's what, something like that is what should happen, but it doesn't. Let me just back up and tell you, everything I told you up to that point was true. But when the head goes down, gravity does want to pull the blood down, but it can't. When the head is up, there are valves in the giraffe's neck that are wide open, so that when the head is up, the heart, which is huge, can pump that blood the whole way up to the top of the head, 16 to 18 feet off the ground. But when the neck goes down, there are sensors in the giraffe's body that turn off the valves in the neck, that stop the flow of blood down to the brain. So that while the giraffe's head is down drinking, there is no blood going into his brain to make him dizzy when he would suddenly stand up. There's no pressure, so he doesn't die from all the pressure. And the little bit of blood that does get there, there's a special organ at the base of his brain, like a big pad, that soaks up whatever blood does get there, and there's never any pressure on the giraffe's brain. Nor does he get dizzy when he suddenly puts his head up. How did that system get there by chance? You see, everything has to be there at the beginning in any system, any creature, any association of creatures. Everything has to be there at the beginning, or nothing functions at all. You can't evolve a giraffe to do that. You can't evolve that frog to do that. So this is the first lesson we wanted to learn tonight. Every single creature, and not just these more amazing, obvious ones that you can actually, that are big enough you can actually see, every creature. I mean, when I was in South Africa, we had to do a unit study on mosquitoes. Now, you and I just swat mosquitoes because they're pests and, you know, they sting you, and we don't care anything about them. But we had to do a unit study. By the time we were done, we were all like, wow, what a phenomenal creature. The things a mosquito can do are astounding. But we don't care about them. We just swat them. But if you look at any creature, anywhere, every creature has its own amazing story to tell. If evolution is true, we should still be seeing thousands of different kinds of creatures struggling onto whatever they're going to become next. Because there's no end to evolution, there's no apex to it. It should still be ongoing. We should still be seeing creatures struggling to grow legs, eyes, arms, whatever, lungs. We don't see that. We see every single creature fully functional, fully operational in its environment. Exactly what we would expect if they were originally designed like God said. So that's the first lesson. Every creature has its own amazing stories to tell. Second lesson is this. Every single creature has automatic education. When we come into the springtime, we see birds coming into our yards. And where we live in Pennsylvania, we always like to see who's the first person to see the robins coming into the yard. So as soon as you see a robin high, you try to beat the others to see who saw the first robin. Anyway, spring comes. Before you know it, all the birds that are coming back up north are beginning to build nests. Now we see that all the time. We don't stop to think, how does the robin know to build a nest? This might be her first time ever being pregnant. She maybe never have had eggs before. How does she know, this, number one, that she's supposed to build a nest? How does she know where to build it? How does she know what shape to make it? How does she know what size? How does she know anything about it? How does she know how to build that nest? Did she go to Robin School of Nest Building? Now you know she didn't. You know what the word is. The word is instinct. What is instinct? Instinct is like a free education that God has given to all creatures so they know exactly what to do in their environment when anything happens to them. With that robin, she knows to build that nest. She knows how big, what shape, everything. I sometimes bring different nests along to show you amazing different designs in nests. And the birds that build them are not programmed to make any other kinds of nests. This is the only one they're programmed to make. You notice robins build the same kind of nest all the time. Eagles always build the same kind of nest. Storks build the same kind of nest. Why is it that a killdeer always lays her nest in the ground and doesn't even really build a nest? How do they all know this? They all know it by instinct. Animals operate by instinct. It's like a free education that God has given to all creatures to operate by. So when that robin builds the nest, she knows, again, by instinct, how to build it. But when she's about to lay her eggs, she knows, again, by instinct, that the eggs have to go into the nest. Then she knows by instinct that she's supposed to sit on them. By instinct, she knows how long to sit on them. When the eggs hatch, she knows by instinct exactly what to feed them, how often, and everything. When I was growing up in Zululand, the Zulu people often used to bring me orphaned animals. So there were always animals around our house. Or outside I had, in these big glass terrarium things, I had 13 snakes. 2 of them were cobras. My mom was not real happy with that because I could have died at any moment if I had been a little careless with that. They weren't all quite that deadly. But I had all these different creatures, and a lot of the more benign creatures or safe creatures the Zulus would bring because they would be orphaned out in the woods somewhere. I mean, I had a whole flock of guinea fowl living under my bed. And they were all little guinea chicks. Do you know what guinea fowls do at 4 o'clock in the morning? They wake up and they all think that I'm their mom. You know, so all these pets I used to have, I would try to rear them and release them back into the wild. Some I wouldn't know what to do with. I'd call the local rangers. What do you do with a galego? What do you do with a rail? You probably don't even know what those things are. I didn't. But what do you do with them? And they would suggest various things. Some animals I was able to do that with. Others would die. And I was a kid. I mean, I would sometimes cry. I would think, man, I wanted to keep you alive, but I didn't know how. If the parents were still alive, they would know exactly what to do. And they know everything to do. Instinct is amazing. It's a free education. Ask any evolutionist where instinct came from. The answer will always be millions of years ago. Stop right there. The moment you say millions of years ago, you're taking it outside the realm of observable science. And remember, evolution is supposedly based on science. You're taking it outside the realm of observable science and you're just going to make up a story. They will say, though, millions of years ago, the robin learned that that was a practical nest. You know, okay, let's just say that. How then is it passed down? How is instinct knowledge passed down? It's one of the miracles of life. If we say it's passed down through genes, genetic information is usually information to build things, not necessarily for knowledge. How is it passed down? That's still a big mystery. God simply says, At the beginning, he made everything and he called it good. What does that mean? It doesn't only mean that the lion is having a good hair day and the zebra looks cool in his pajamas. It means that too, they're beautiful animals, but it also means the creature is finished. He lacks nothing anymore. Nothing. From now on, when the creature is hungry, he will know exactly what to go to for food. What will be food for him and what won't be. He will know exactly what to do to find a mate. He will know exactly what to do to take care of their young. He will know exactly what to do when wintertime comes, when danger approaches. They won't have to learn any of it. They will know it automatically. Instinct is very limiting, but it's also all the creature needs to survive. And so when God made all the creatures, he called it good. Not that just that they are beautiful, but they're also complete. So that from now on until the end of time, those creatures, generation after generation after generation, will know automatically what to do when any of those situations arrive. So that's the second lesson, is instinct is one of the most incredible evidences against just random chance processes that we can even talk about. And when we do our little slide program, our little sort of safari around the world here in a few minutes, we'll be seeing some evidence of that. Third, and last little lesson we want to look at today is, if evolution is true, why is everything the size that it is compared to everything else in nature? For example, why in nature are you small compared to the trees? I mean, why are most trees much bigger than you? What if the tallest tree on the planet was only a foot tall? Well, think about what you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have wood to build things with. You'd have to eat 10,000 apples a day to keep the doctor away. You wouldn't have beauty in the fall. You wouldn't even be alive because there wouldn't be enough leaves there to pull all the poisons out of the air and give you oxygen. Think about it. Just because trees are the size they are compared to everything else. What about ants? Why aren't ants as big as you are? And imagine if they were. And imagine if you came here tonight and you saw these big piles of earth around here and you thought, what, was there a dump truck over here? And you go and look at one of these piles and you see there's a big hole in it. You go looking and suddenly an ant as big as you are comes running out of that hole. Then another one. And you go, man, this is a big anthill. Okay, now think about that. If you ran away, would you be able to outrun that ant? There's no way. And if it caught you, would you be more powerful than that ant? There's no way. Think about the balance of nature. All around us, in the grass, in the woods, there are millions, there are billions of ants. But most of them are very small. If they were much bigger, the whole ecosystem wouldn't even work correctly. Because God has given the ants super speed and super strength relative to their body size, because they're his perfect little garbage collectors. They keep the earth clean and sanitized. And the whole ecosystem wouldn't even work properly if ants were any bigger. We used to watch, in Africa, sometimes we'd watch these big black army ants raiding the termite mounds. And in fact, on our last safari, we actually watched 3 little army units of matabele ants raiding the termite mounds. And it's amazing to watch. It's like a little unit of maybe 400 or 500 ants that leaves their nest. And the matabele ants will go and they literally march about 4 or 5 wide in a column and maybe about 8 feet long. And they'll go and raid. And as soon as they find a termite mound, boy, it's curtains for the termites. They immediately go in and there's a hissing sound that the ants make with their legs. Next thing you know, they're coming out with 2 and 3 termites in their mandible, and they all turn around. The whole army turns around and marches back the other way, carrying the termites in their mouth. But if you were to imagine that you could do that, that would be like you and me picking up 2 or 3 people the same size as us, and then running at 60 miles an hour with them. And we have not been given that kind of speed and strength relative to our body, but the ant has. And just watch these matabele ants. It's amazing to watch. Well, in Africa, we used to kind of do our own thing because we'd find these big termite mounds with, like the kind that are made out of concrete, The termites make their own concrete. And we used to have these big firecrackers, and we shove the firecrackers in and light the fuse, boom, and watch all the termites come pouring out. But anyway, the big black army ants would sometimes go running in and come back out doing the same thing, carrying all these termites in their mandibles. So it's amazing. Just think about the size of anything on the planet relative to the size of you, or to anything else. if evolution's true, why is everything so perfectly sized and shaped? Let me explain that a little bit more. Imagine that you are going to sleep one night in your bedroom and you hear a little sound coming past your ear. Here's the sound. It goes right past your ear. You know what it is, right? Mosquitoes. I can't stand that sound. If I hear a mosquito coming past my ear, I got to get up, turn on the light, find the fly swatter, and whack, 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 get rid of the thing. Here's a worse sound. Now you know why that's the worst sound, right? Because now you know she's landed on you, and now you know what she's about to do. But the point is, that little tiny mosquito bothers you. What if mosquitoes were this big? Now imagine. I mean, you have to ask yourself a question, why not? We have parrots at home that are this big. Why aren't mosquitoes this big? And by the way, just a nice little thought. Imagine if they were this big, and imagine this thing was sitting on your wall like they do. And imagine you say goodnight to your family, you go turn off your light, and everything's dark, and you go to bed. She's hungry, she can smell you. She's not going to come down going, no, 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 no. She's got big propellers. She's going to go, she's going to land on you and stick this thing in you and suck all the Pepsi out of you. The whole point, though, is, why aren't mosquitoes that big? I think because God said so big and no bigger, because you cause enough problems for people as it is. Anyway, how about this guy? I'm sure, well, how many of you have ever been stung by a bee? Most of us have been stung by bees, right? Now, the bee that stung you was not this big, because most of us have gotten stung by bees, or our first sting might have been when we were kids, okay? If bees were all this size, then you'd be dead. Because we understand from beekeepers that an adult can only get about 400 bee stings before it would be fatal to us. Our bodies would not be able to process that much venom, and then we would die. Well, this bee is about 200 times the size of a real bee. And if this size bee stung you as a kid, that would be way too much venom for your body and you wouldn't survive. So think about the size of bees. Now, in Africa, you had to be careful. I mean, when you got your bee sting, you probably got a bee sting or maybe two. In Africa, you had to be careful because I grew up with the African killer bees. Now, they're no more dangerous per bee than bees over here, but as a group, they're a lot more aggressive, and you had to be really careful. They would sometimes swarm, and in our house that we had in Africa, they had this masonite ceiling, and sometimes they would find the attic. They would build huge hives up there, and we'd literally have honey running down our living room walls. You can't have that, so, because that pulls in other undesirable creatures and so forth. So we had to figure out what to do to get rid of these bees, smoke them out or whatever. One year, we had behind our house a big wood shed, and in the wood shed was where we kept our chopped wood. That was the only way we had of cooking food and keeping the house warm. But one year, in the woodshed was a huge black wooden box that we used to have kindling in. Well, the kindling was gone, and so the bees found the box and moved in. So my mom and dad thought, well, let's just let them there. Maybe we'll eventually get some honey from them one day. And actually, they eventually did. But when we had to go into the woodshed to get wood, we had to be real, real careful as we walked past this black box. When you'd walk into the woodshed, it sounded like the whole black box had a big electric motor running inside it with all the bees. So you had to be real careful as you got the wood, and at the end, their bees would be flying out and landing, flying out and landing. They didn't mind us as long as they didn't make any noise. One day, my dad was mowing our part of the mission station around our house. Well, our mission station had a little riding tractor, and he was mowing back and forth in front of the woodshed. The bees didn't mind that. And by the way, just by way of perspective, my mom and dad were missionaries on a mission hospital station. My dad was a bush pilot for the hospital station, and that was his major job. He did maintenance work, he flew the airplane, he was also a Bible teacher, so he wore a lot of hats. My mom taught English to the advanced students at the hospital, nursing students, and then she also was the station hostess. We, for our part, as long before there was any opportunity for any kind of homeschooling or anything like that, we had to go away to a boarding school. So we would go to a mission-run boarding establishment, and then we went to a public school. And that's where I learned about evolution when I was a kid. But in any event, so that's how we wound up on this mission station. So my dad was mowing past this shed. Suddenly a helicopter flew over. Now we never had helicopters in our area. For whatever reason, a helicopter flew over. The bees did not like that. They came storming out of their box. Who was the first person they saw? My poor old dad, just mowing. So here he is mowing, helicopter flies over, next thing he knows, bees everywhere, stinging him, top to bottom. So he jumped off the tractor, it kept running, it ran into a tree far away, stopped. He went running down to the house to escape the bees. They all followed him. He slammed the door, he was stung from head to foot, he swelled all up, but it didn't kill him. But they kept going. They were angry now, a helicopter flew over. They swarmed in 250 feet in every direction. They killed everything that they saw that moved. They killed my brother's rabbits, anything that moved, they killed it. So you didn't mess with the African killer bees, unless your name was Mike Snavely, because I was always too curious about things. So one day, I was at that boarding establishment I was mentioning earlier, and I was alone in the yard for whatever reason, playing by the sandbox, and I heard a sound I had never heard before. And I looked over toward the house, which is about as far away as that back wall, and I looked over the house, and all I saw was the whole sky turning brown. And I realized that they were bees, but they were coming toward me. I realized there's no way I could run toward the house, because they'd get to me before I would get to the house. I didn't know what to do. And here came all these bees. The whole sky was just turning brown. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I dropped on the ground and made myself as small as I could and as still as I could. And I could hear they all came. But then, right as they got over me, they all swerved and flew into a hedge about as far away as that wall. And I'm lying on the ground watching. I'm seeing them all turning and flying into the hedge, so they must have had a queen among them. She landed on a branch in the hedge, and all the other bees landed on top of her, making this huge ball of bees in the hedge. And I'm lying on the ground going, what are they doing? What are they doing? You know, I'm just a little kid. So they all land. So I did one of these things, you know. Whoa, what in the world is this? So I got up close and I saw all these bees in there. I thought, wow, I've never seen anything like this. So I couldn't let well enough alone. So I went and got a big long stick.
Oh,
and the stick had a fork at the end of it. So I parked the fork right below the big ball of bees, and I looked way over at the house where I was going to make my escape to. And I got all ready. I went, and shook. To this day, I can still hear what sounded like 1,000 lawnmower engines starting as the bees just came off of that ball in clumps and then just dissolved and came right at me. All these bees coming right at me. I dropped that stick and ran with that gleeful horror. Running like mad, I could hear the bees coming right behind me. You know, guys, most of you guys have done this in the past. You get those, when you're kids, you get those little bow and arrows with a suction cup. You see a big wasp nest, you go whap, and if you hit it, here come the wasps, right? Same idea, although they're all coming after me, okay? I ran like mad to the house. I could hear the bees right behind me. Ran like mad to the house. Got to the house, jumped inside, slammed the door. I escaped. You know, little boys don't always think. I didn't think that there might be somebody else outside.
Oh, no.
Fortunately, there wasn't. So anyway, I stood by the glass door, and I'm going, you know, and all these bees are seeing me, and they're flying at me, and they're hitting the glass, bing, 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 popping off the glass. I thought later on, you know what? That was really dumb. Because what if, in my sprinting, I had twisted my ankle or stepped in a hole or whatever and fell down? There's no way I would have escaped. I would have gotten killed that day. So I learned a lesson that day about the bees. But fortunately, even if a couple of them had stung me, if they were this size, I wouldn't have survived. That's another stinging insect. How about this guy? Most of us see these things in the fall. Yellow jackets, especially out east where we are. I mean, do you have yellow jackets here? Okay, so you know what they are. We were camping one day, and I put pancakes on my plate, put the syrup on. The moment the syrup got there, here came the yellow jackets, all landing. And I remember thinking, how in the world did you guys sense the syrup that quickly? So I watched them all landing. So I took my fork and I moved them all one side of the plate. Okay, you guys move over there, I'll move my pancakes here. So all these yellow jackets would land, I would put them all there and I would keep eating, no problem. But I watched one guy walk up to this big blob of syrup and eat the whole thing. There's a huge blob of syrup, almost the same size as the yellow jacket. He ate the whole thing. Then what was really funny is he couldn't take off. He'd go, and repeatedly, he'd climb up and try to fly, and he was constantly falling off to the ground. I never realized that a creature like him could take on more weight of food than the ability of his wings to carry him away. In any event, if one of these things would sting you, if it was this size, I have no idea what it could do to you. But here's the point, though. We've probably all been stung by a wasp or hornet, or certainly by mosquitoes, maybe by bees. These are guys that can sting us. But unless you're really allergic to them, they don't really hurt you. But there are some creatures that have very dangerous venoms that if they were any bigger, they would hurt us. Why is it that all these guys have these amazing, venomous, painful stings that don't really hurt us? But if they were any bigger, they would. They would actually do some harm. Well, now, you've killed a mosquito, and you've gone back to bed and your light is off. You wake up later on in the night and you think, oh, come on, did the cat get on the bed and whatever? So you feel something walking on you. So you turn on the light and you look down and you see this crawling up you. Now I know what you would do. I know what you would do. If you saw this, you'd go, oh, isn't she cute? No, you wouldn't. You just die of a heart attack right then and there. Save your poison, buddy. I'm gone. The point, though, is, and I won't go into this. We have a DVD, and I think you brought some, right? On spiders. We have a whole program just on spiders that I was asked to do at the Science Forum in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, years ago. That became very, very popular. I thought everybody hated spiders. Well, it became a very popular seminar, so we made a DVD of it. It took 3 years to do, but it's not scary, even though you might think, oh, look at that terrible cover on the DVD. But the video is not meant to be scary. It's actually meant to show how beneficial they are and why these are actually our allies. In fact, the video is called Spiders, Ogres, Allies, and Architects. The ogre part is not meant for you. It's meant for the creatures that they eat. In any event, spiders aren't this size. The biggest one on Earth is only about half that size. Only half that size. So anyway, spiders are actually our friends. Anyway, that's another creature. How about this guy? You all know what this guy is. It's a caterpillar, and you've never seen a caterpillar this big. But now think, just very briefly, if caterpillars were this big, you and I would be dead. Not because they would eat us, but because if they were this big, they would defoliate all the trees in the world and then nothing could stay alive. Think about the amazing balance of nature all around us. Is it just random chance, or do you see any design there? And if you see design, you have to ask yourself a question. If there's design, is there a designer? Well, of course there is. Well, then who's the designer? The Bible tells us, of course, that it's Jesus. So nature tells us all around, everywhere we look, space, earth, sea, everywhere, that there's a designer. The Bible tells us who the designer is. Think about something else. This guy only eats leaves. That's all he ever eats his whole life. Munches on leaves. Then he turns into a chrysalis, or he spins a cocoon if it's a moth, and he turns into something else. This guy's going to turn into a butterfly. Now, if the caterpillar was this big, how big would the butterfly be? Well, the butterfly would be huge. How long will it live? It wouldn't last very long, because if it tried to hydrate itself, well, it can go to water, of course, but if it goes to a flower to get nectar, it's going to knock the whole flower over. And by the way, how does it even know to go to a flower to get nectar? Again, instinct. Every single part of an animal or a creature's decision processes or whatever are all guided by instinct. So this guy is going to wind up being this huge butterfly that won't be able to survive very long at all because it won't find anything to eat. it'll lock the plant over, then it goes to, as soon as it unrolls its little tube to get some nectar out, it'll be way too big for the flower. Everything is perfectly sized and shaped compared to everything else. Caterpillars also have an amazing bit of camouflage typically when they're in this stage. And so a caterpillar will usually be camouflaged on a leaf that it's sitting on, so you can't see it very well, so it'll survive this stage. But then automatically one day by instinct, it knows it's had enough. So it climbs on down to a branch and literally strips its skin off, and off comes the skin, off comes the pajamas, and then it becomes something completely different. It becomes what we now know as a chrysalis, call it the chrysalis, and then that chrysalis is actually camouflaged to look like the branch that it's on. The caterpillar looked like the leaf, now the chrysalis looks a little bit like another twig sitting on a branch. So it's camouflaged again. It stays in that position for a little bit, then after a while begins to wiggle, and then that skin gets ripped off, gets climbed out of. By the way, if you were to take a knife and cut into the chrysalis halfway through, all you'd see is a pile of goo inside. Everything is changing according to a pre-designed blueprint. Where did that blueprint come from? Who or what is reading it? What language is it written in that something reads to take it to the next level? So it strips out of that chrysalis, and out comes a brand new creature again. Now there's many miracles that take the place in the life of this creature, because he has a special kind of heart that pumps a special kind of blood through its wings, and in that blood it has a special kind of cement. The wings get bigger and bigger, that cement sticks to the veins, it begins to harden, and in a few minutes it dries, and the butterfly can flap his wings and fly away. He's a totally new creature. And no longer does he have 14 stubby little legs, he's got 6 legs, he's an insect. No longer does he have no idea where he is, he's got eyes and antennae, he can feel his way around. No longer is he limited to the tree, he can fly. No longer does he eat leaves, he eats nectar. No longer is he an ugly green worm, he's a beautiful butterfly. To me, this is the perfect illustration from nature of the new life that Jesus Christ gives to human beings who accept him as their Savior. The Bible says those who are in Christ Jesus are new creatures. Old things have passed away. Behold, that means look, everything has become new. It's a perfect illustration from nature of the new life that we can have, but only through Jesus.